Item 13. You have before you 3 notices of motion in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 12. The first motion is from Cllr Gomez Aspron.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I forgot these were coming and should have paced myself speaking earlier on. I was filling my glass as you called me, so I apologise. So the Council notes a significant rise in leasehold sales of homes in recent years. A total of 4.3 million properties across England, almost 1 in 5 of all homes, are now classified as leasehold. Leasehold tenure is particularly prevalent in the North West, and the Borough of St Helens is no exception, with housing developments in towns and villages in the borough being affected. There is a growing concern among homeowners in the borough who feel ripped off by their leasehold contracts, locked into arrangements which force them to seek permission to make basic alterations and find they're obliged to pay extortionate ground rents and/or rip-off service charges. That many local leaseholders did not understand what being a leaseholder meant until they had already purchased a property, and more than 9 in 10 leaseholders regret buying a leasehold property whatsoever. This council backs the Labour Party's campaign to set up a national inquiry into the scandal of leasehold mis-selling, ban the routine sale of new leasehold houses, end exploitative ground rents and unfair terms for existing leaseholders, make it easier and cheaper for leaseholders to buy the freehold on their home, make common hold the default tenure for all new flats and apartments, introduce regulation of managing agents to protect leaseholders. Therefore, the Council resolves that the Leader of the Council writes to 1. The Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government to call for implementation of the above actions, 2. Local MPs to ask for their support to tackle leasehold abuse through their parliamentary activities, and 3. The chairs of the relevant scrutiny panels to request that an appropriate piece of scrutiny work is undertaken to establish how widespread the issue is in the Borough of St Helens. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gomez Aspron. Councillor Bell.
I rise to second.
Councillor Gomez Aspron. Before you start to speak, can I just mention, you'll have 10 minutes to speak, and what I'll do is anybody who speaks, I will indicate when you've got about 1 minute left, if that's okay with everybody. Thank you.
That's perfect for those of us who like the sound of their own voice, so thank you very much. I'd just like to do a quick introduction of what leasehold actually is. So it's quite an odd problem, and it probably depends if you've had a lot of development in your ward over the last 10 or 15 years. By no means is leasehold new as a concept, but the idea of how it works in the business model for it has changed. Firstly, I'd like to thank Conor McGinn, MP, for the work he's done. I and Councillor Bell met with him at Westminster, which was funded out of our own pockets and not the council purse before the forums go wild, to discuss leasehold as an issue in St Helens North. And as I've mentioned in the introduction, it's a particular problem in the North West and our borough. Leasehold isn't new. If you live in an area that has been owned by a landed gentry in the past, so most of Lord Daresbury and Derby's estate, and Lord Newton and Newton Willows, a lot of people have leasehold properties. The thing that's changed is you used to get a 999-year lease with the property that you would never. You've had good innings if you can expire that lease, so it was never really a risk. And the fact that it was only 20p a year meant that most people didn't even bother to collect them in modern terms. In Bridge Street in Earlstown, you pay a leasehold to fund the first divorce of the second Lord Newton, which is what it says on the invoice. There's probably a story in there somewhere, but it just shows that it's not a new problem. But like I say, the fact that it was so small in amount means nowadays people tend not to collect them. There used to be an office on the high street that collected it for the estates. There used to be a lady that went round and collected it from the properties. One day it turns out that she didn't actually work for them and she probably retired to the Bahamas. So the idea of people scamming leasehold and residents isn't new. I think she was just ahead of the game. In Newton Willows, since 2005, they've built roughly 110 properties a year, and the majority of those, where I am, are leasehold. It depends which developers you've got working in your area, and how big the estates are. But typically, down our end, that has been the common problem since 2005. Interestingly, the only countries in the world to have leasehold houses are England and Wales. So it's not even a national problem, it's very specific to here. So I thought I'd bring up some examples of things that go wrong or can go wrong with leasehold. So this is an example in Merseyside, where somebody was paying £250 a year leasehold and they had to pay £60 if they wanted to change the doorbell. and the company who found out they'd done that without permission threatened to repossess once they'd been found out to have built a conservatory. So neither of those things, I would say, are quite extreme, but the point is that you can be scammed if you don't have the right permission, which costs a fortune. Again, a Taylor Wimpey site, so it was £295 a year in ground rent, but it turned out the rent reviews were every 10 years. So in the first 10 years, it went up to £590, the second, £1180, and then within the 30 years, your ground rent was £9,440 a year just by doubling it. So in the excitement of buying a new house, it can often be something that gets missed without realising the consequences. When you want to buy the leasehold, you might initially be quoted £5,000 as a typical figure, but usually triples once it's sold on without notice, which is a position I'm in where I live. We never got a notification they were selling the leasehold, we just got a letter from the new company telling us it had happened. And other quotes rise to £13,000. A quick figure is it can cost between 50 and 100 quid to even pay to get a response. You don't even get a response free from the company. It can be 2,500 for a conservatory, 250 to have a pet, 60 quid to replace a doorbell, 2,000 quid for permission to build an extension, or 300 quid to move your fence. There's a lot of expectation versus reality, and so you wait until one expectation, especially if you're moving into a new house, you usually wait to try and buy it after a couple of years, at which point you realise it's already been sold on and they won't sell it you anyway at that stage. You can arrange your finances, but it gets to such an unreasonable amount, there's nothing you can do about it. And one of the most damaging things is the leasehold periods are so short nowadays that if you've lived in your house for a relatively short amount of time, you might not have long enough left on your lease to secure a mortgage against the property. So Lloyds, Nationwide, RBS, Santander, Barclays, HSBC, Coventry, Virgin Money, Yorkshire, TSB, all refuse mortgages on leasehold houses in certain circumstances, mostly if you've not got enough left on your lease. But sometimes it can be as much as if your lease value is 0.1% of the value of the property, you won't get a mortgage, which with the thing that I've just spoke about doubling, that can be hit quite quick. Homes with unreasonable clauses, if they determine you've got unreasonable clause, they won't give you a mortgage. All of this is stuff that you might not necessarily have known. And Yorkshire mortgage will cap it at £1,000 a year ground rent, so if you go over that, you will not get a mortgage from them on the property. So I think the point that I was trying to make is it's easy to say read the T's and C's when you move in the excitement of buying a new house. And like I say, by the time you click what you've got, it's usually been sold on and you may be being fleeced. So we've been working with the National Leasehold campaign, and Councillor McCall is going to touch more on the party position, but it's good to see the Labour Party back in this. If you've got a ward where this is an issue, you will have typically younger couples moving in and people that are retired into newer big properties that might not know the iceberg is coming and it's a problem. So I'd ask for your support. Typically, it's not a government issue in that I would say most governments haven't addressed the problem because it still exists, although it has become more prevalent in recent years as we build new houses on big former industrial estates. So I would hope those in the chamber can support the motion and stick up for the residents in your ward that might not know there's a bit of an iceberg coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gomez Aspron. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this evening I've seconded this really important motion for the people that we represent in Newton. As Councillor Gomez Aspron has said, it's been an issue that's come up time and time again on the doorstep. I want to focus on why this motion needs to be raised at a local level, because I am aware that often scorn is pawned by some of us who attempt to address national issues at our local level, but actually it's very relevant. For me, I was elected to be the voice of residents in the ward that I represent, and whether that's about challenging practice within the council, improving practice within the council, whether it's dog bins, whether it's parks, or whether it's representing their voice by trying to push those issues as high as I can. And if the highest I can push them is here in this chamber, then I will happily do that. This is impacting on our local residents. It's impacting on the people in our wards, and I think we've got a duty to raise those concerns. We can't simply say there's nothing we can do because we're local councillors, because actually it might be a national issue, but it is a local issue too. Local councils are impacted by national decision making every single day. And we have to lobby on those. It is a part of what we are elected to do, especially at the moment when you think we're going into conference season. Maybe, maybe not, depending on what's going on at the moment in Parliament, but we're technically going into conference season. So most of the parties here are going to be going into their conferences as members of their parties to help put forward and lobby for change within the policies of their own parties. And by committing to this motion tonight, it commits us as political members of whichever party to go forth and try and make that change around leasehold practice. In Newton, we've seen large numbers of new housing developments, as my colleague has said. I welcome the new house builds personally because I want my family and my children to have the option to live locally and in good housing. I myself live in a leasehold property, but it's a really old terraced house built in the 1900s. And I think I should pay £3 a year, but the poor lady on our street that's supposed to collect it gets sick of it and just pays it herself because it's about 30 quid for the street. So I'm one of the lucky ones, but unfortunately this practice is being exploited, and it's significant for us because outside of London, the North West is the highest impacted area. So 27% of leasehold properties sold in 2018 were in the North West area, and only London was higher. The trend is also true of new build houses. 21% sold as leasehold in the North West, and new build houses were also more likely to be sold as leasehold in London as well, probably because they've got a lot of flats, but it was about 18% there. So the government have actually committed to reforming some of the issues with leasehold, because I think every party identifies it as an issue. And in the 2017 Housing White Paper, they have discussed this and they've committed to a consultation, and that consultation was held. The government announced its intention to ban the practice of selling new build houses as leasehold, and that's great, and it confirmed that it would do that in June of this year. However, that's only for properties that are being built now from the date that this comes into place. So we're still stuck with a situation where anybody who's bought their leasehold prior to that is in this situation where they can be exploited on a continual basis. So we all need to push to get legislation that doesn't just affect those going forward, but gives some protection to those who've already bought the house. And it certainly won't help the people in my ward who are suffering greatly from this. So I would ask everybody in the chamber to support it this evening, regardless of political factionalism, but actually because we need to come together to support our residents and the work of the APPG, the all-party parliamentary group on leasehold, who have done some great work nationally, and both of our MPs in St Helens North and South are involved in that work too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Is there anybody else? Councillor Gomez Aspron, do you wish to sum up on your motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's always promising to hear cross-party support for these type of things. I think that's the second compliment from Councillor Jones in 12 months, so I might have to sit down and get my breath. The next point I was going to make is you're always more than welcome to bring your own motions, but I'm more than happy to take up the slack until that happens. All right, don't milk it. So moving on, I'd just like to say thank you for the support from the wider area. It's important to say, Councillor Bell touched on it, it's not an anti-development motion. We need new houses. I could not live in the hometown that I live in and grew up in if new houses hadn't been built. The point is doing it in a way that doesn't penalise families who live there by fleecing them for the pleasure of living there. These aren't ground maintenance fees. You don't get a park and your grass mowed. You get nothing back for the fee that you pay. And for that pleasure, they charge you for a reply on a letter, and then they might double it. So it's a pretty fair deal if you're on the end that are getting paid. For us lot, it isn't. So I'd like to say thank you for the support. I think that's addressed the majority of the points. And like I say, Councillor Jones, I'm more than happy to take the slack until you can start bringing some of your own motions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gomez Aspron. All those in favour of the motion, please show. I think that's carried.